Another stated that individuals with autism respond more quickly and less accurately to situations with conflict and emotion.
Did you take a picture?
No, Louise, I did not take a picture. I was a little busy trying to get air to my brain cells, a burden you've not yet faced.
Allowing them to make decisions faster without it.
You've got 1 minute to make an impression, and that's all you can come up with? You want to know my sign, too, Jack? Or how about my favorite color, or if I'm a Brittany or a Christina? Here, I'll ask you a question. Was the last time you had an interesting thought when you considered flinging yourself off a building? Bye, Jack.
However, ignoring social cues can result in incorrect responses if the task or decision requires correctly interpreting others' emotion.
I'm not going back to school.
You're pregnant.
No.
Sick? You look pasty.
Sometimes quick, non-social decision-making can be beneficial, but in other situations, it generates undesirable consequences.
I used to rest Stockholm, now I prefer alone. I'd rather do this on my own than be disrespected and feel so neglected. I'm ready to go.
I am so tired and dysregulated today that I don't even know if I feel capable of following the script, which maybe is for the best because if you haven't noticed, I really do like to embody the energy, the character of whatever we're talking about for the day. And what we're talking about for the day is being on the spectrum. ADHD, autism, all of it. I got all of it. And right now I'm experiencing ADHD burnout. This episode required so much of my brain and it's so personal. It's such a personal topic because I wanted to talk about the demonization of ADHD and autism coded characters in media and how that reflects the demonization of ADHD and autistic people in real life. But maybe the most important part of what I want to discuss with this topic is, does it really matter if you're a villain or a bad friend because of your autism if you're still ultimately a bad friend or bad person? Hi, I'm Katie, and I'll be your internet cult leader for the day. I host a podcast called The Difficult Conversations with Katie Rocks podcast, where we discuss things from a place of a little more nuance. And if you too believe that more than one thing can be true at once, you should like, subscribe, and leave a comment. And if you'd like to enjoy bonus episodes of the show, behind the scenes content, and ad-free episodes, make sure that you join us on the Difficult Conversations with Katie Rocks Patreon. Today's sponsor is, please follow this podcast on Apple Music and Spotify. Please, please, please.
And also the merch I created out of hate for Nick
Hey,
Fuentes.
bitch, we control your bodies.
What inspired this design? I would love to tell you. I think the most important thing for me as a survivor of sexual assault several times over is that this painting is the story of a woman reclaiming agency on so many different levels. Artemisia Gentileschi was an Italian painter whose accomplishments were largely overshadowed by the fact that her mentor raped her. But that's partially because she's thought to be the first rape victim in history to successfully take her rapist to court and win. But something that me and Artemisia have in common is that it's not enough just to win. You gotta take that shit to the motherfucking wall. So about 10 years later, she decides to paint a reimagining of the biblical story of Judith, where she paints herself as Judith beheading the general who represents her mentor. Though her book is cut from the Protestant version of the Bible, it's thought that this is how the Israelites were freed. And Artemisia is the first painter to depict Judith doing it with conviction. And so this design meant a lot to me in the light of this election. As an autistic person that is deeply interested in philosophical ideas that promote the greatest good over individual whims, not utilitarianism, fuck Jeremy Bennett. But I've just never been down with this ideal of, oh, I'm sorry, that's just the way I am because I'm neurodivergent, so sucks to suck. That sucks. That's not the idea. That's not why we want more awareness for people on the spectrum and neurodivergent people. We don't want the freedom to just mistreat people and just, I don't know, destroy society or whatever people are using that for. And I can't speak for everybody, but what I personally want is a little patience and some tolerance. Like, oh, I didn't understand how you meant that, but I really would like to understand you and I would like for us to get along. Can you explain it to me? Will you extend me the grace of understanding that the way I perceive the world is a little different, and so it might take a little longer for us to resolve conflicts. So I can recognize that the internet is full of people who believe that they're the main character, and because they're neurodivergent, everything they do because of their neurodivergence is okay. But to me, that's always a really dangerous spectrum to put your morals or beliefs on, because most of the most violent and perverse people you know are also neurodivergent, because the way that their brains work it's divesting from the way that brains are supposed to work. And so they cope by harming people. And if that's bad, and we can acknowledge that, like, dude, you cannot just like people or whatever it is you're doing because you're neurodivergent. On the other end of the spectrum, maybe it's not okay for you to pop your gum 20 times in class because you're neurodivergent when it's so disruptive for everybody else in this learning environment. So I do want to give that acknowledgement while also recognizing that I do think it's kind of harmful when we make things black and white. So if I can give that acknowledgement, what I want on the other side of that is that me and other autistic people needing a little more context or a little more patience does not necessarily mean that we're the villains of the show, as shows like Gilmore Girls painted Paris Geller.
Everyone always says that. This is my speaking voice. This is its natural volume.
I'm the most likely target, so I've already made up a list of enemies, which I've narrowed down from 26 to 5.
Just at Yale?
Just in this building.
Move! Is it raining?
No, it's National Baptism Day. Tie your tubes, idiot.
Or Suits painted Lewis.
You don't sue us. We sue you. I'm gonna have your balls in a vice so tight, you're gonna wish you were born without balls. That's right, lady, I'm talking to you. I'm gonna shove this lawsuit so far up your ass, you're gonna be the first lawyer in history to die with a lawsuit in her ass. I'm gonna burn you to the ground. I'm gonna do a rain dance.
We're really here for Paris because I just watched the Gilmore Girls for the first time this past month. I binged all 7 seasons plus the A Year in the Life special. And the whole time I'm thinking, like, I hate how they treat Paris. I know she's imperfect. I know she's a lot of things, but she actually is like a textbook autistic person whose needs are not being met. And so she's constantly positioned to like react in very poor ways.
Relax. I'm okay with you making valedictorian over me.
Oh, good. Thanks.
Sure. I actually Googled the personal histories of Ivy League valedictorians going back 25 years and found some enlightening statistics. They don't necessarily do too well in later life. Did you know that?
No?
Oh, yeah. A lot of business failure, crumbled marriages, suicides, obesity.
Okay.
A bunch died in car crashes. Several did time. One suffocated when his cat fell asleep on his face.
Okay.
And then a lot of times is that she just needs help coping with her symptoms.
He said once that if I ever needed to talk to anyone, I could come talk to you. Hello? What the hell did Romaine mean when he was going on about weeding out the hyper-intense in the interview process? He stopped just short of calling me by name. I'm losing it.
Not now, Paris.
I tried to throw the questioning over to you because I was about to heave and you left me hanging, so I had to come home and heave.
I'll talk to you tomorrow, Paris.
When I was doing research for the script, I found a lot of interesting information about how autistic people struggle sometimes to emotionally regulate and how they're more prone for conflict. One said that it is estimated that 70 to 90% of children and adolescents with ASD experience clinically significant emotional and behavioral problems. Another stated that individuals with autism respond more quickly and less accurately to situations with conflict and emotion. This one was really interesting to me because it said a recent study found that individuals with autism spectrum condition demonstrate a trade-off between speed and accuracy when faced with emotionally charged situations with conflict. It is well established that individuals with ASC tend to pay less attention to social and emotional information. So one possible explanation for this is finding that individuals with ASC incorporate less of that information into their decision making than neurotypicals, allowing them to make decisions faster without it. However, ignoring social cues can result in incorrect responses if the task or decision requires correctly interpreting others' emotions. Sometimes quick, non-social decision making can be beneficial, but in other situations, it generates undesirable consequences, which in layman terms means that when an autistic person feels emotionally charged or they're faced with an emotionally charged situation or conflict, they're more likely to prioritize speed of response to the situation over accuracy of response. And when you overlay the difficulty understanding or processing the emotions of others with the difficulty of regulating your own emotions and a need to respond to a difficult situation quickly, then it's kind of easy to see how that can become a powder keg for conflict. And when we take that and overlay that with a lot of what we see in Paris Geller and the Gilmore Girls, a lot of what Paris is saying that it comes across as mean or unkind or harsh comes from her not understanding where the other person's coming from.
I just want her to get into a good school. She has such potential.
Well, so did Charles Manson.
What?
It's her misinterpreting something that Rory does or says as Rory being against her or challenging her, or even just the general presence of Rory in the school. Like, a new student is entering the school, so this is a threat to what I have going on. And so she's constantly in these situations where she's not able to accurately grasp the emotional context of what a person is saying or doing. And so she is responding in kind. And the reason why I think that's so important to acknowledge that as different from Paris just straight up being a villain is that once she does get to know the character of these people in the show, she is more likely to interpret their behavior as kind or authentic, even when it's not. There are times in the show that kind of piss me off because Paris is in a place where she now trusts the Gilmore Girls. She loves Lorelai, she loves Rory, she believes that they're her supporters, that they're friends, that they are her extended family. And Gilmore Girls still kind of treat her like she's annoying.
We're completely pump free.
I'm so stupid. I mean, why else would you want to have bi-weekly lunches with me?
There are many, many reasons. And they will come to me just in a second.
But instead of interpreting those signals as these people are annoyed with me and I'm being overwhelming or too much, she just trusts that whatever weird thing she feels isn't relevant to the situation because these are my friends.
You mentioned Rory and a thing went off in my brain. It's just a mother thing, but I love our lunches. I really do. Please stay.
Are you sure? Because
Yes, I'm completely positive. Everything's good.
3 seconds earlier.
What is she doing here?
We're having lunch. Oh, Suki, I'm breaking up with her today, all right? I'm ending it, like I promised, so back off.
These are my friends, so this must be okay. And if this wasn't okay, they would just tell me this wasn't okay because as the autistic person, Paris is like, I tell you when I'm not okay, even when it's too much and it's over direct. I mean, she always makes sure that people knows where she stands, how she feels.
I'm gonna grab Barbie's neck and squeeze until her expandable hair falls out and she's dead, dead, dead.
Even when people don't give her the same courtesy. And that's something I really relate to because I've always been told that I was overly direct or harsh or mean and sometimes over dramatic when it came to emotional moments, which is really interesting because I'm usually pretty stoic in my everyday life, like very non-reactive, non-responsive to like big dramatic things. Like I got punched in the face and I didn't scream. I was just kind of like, what the fuck? But it was really scary. But like I didn't need to show this person I was scared for me to actually be scared. And that's just always how I've been. Like I'm not really the biggest performer of my emotions unless there's some kind of big conflict. Getting punched in the face is a conflict, but I mean, it was one and done. Fuck you. I'm moving on. I'm calling the police, whatever. I don't need to react to call the police. But if it's a situation that requires a reaction to me, it's usually too big, which is why when I originally wrote the script, I wrote it from a place of wanting to really discuss how scary it is to exist in the world as both a woman and an autistic woman, and really like a Black autistic woman, because as we spoke about in the previous video, violence against women is increasing as a way to counter how radical women have become in the last couple of decades. And when you pair how angry people have become in these active political movements like the manosphere and the red pill movement and the red hat people who were just very angry and excited to demonstrate violence against women to punish them for wanting to be seen as human, with somebody like me who has difficulty processing the severity of the emotion in the other person and who has a natural inclination just to like shoot from whatever emotion I'm feeling and just say what I think regardless of how that might be perceived or rude or not, that becomes a powder keg where I feel like I am more vulnerable to violence than most women. And really that's why I got punched in the face, because I was just stating my opinion and this person became very, 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 very irate until the point where they punched me in the face, a grown man. And in a podcast audio bonus that I ultimately decided not to release, I was kind of ranting about that from that place of like, even before I got hit in the face, that I am kind of afraid with everything that's going on in the world that I'm more likely to become a victim of violence than ever because of the way my brain works and the way that I show up in the world, which is as a woman. Does that mean that we should give people like Paris and myself a complete pass when the behavior that we bring to the moment is actually unsuitable, unreasonable, and unnecessary? No, not necessarily. I do think that there are times that my brain, my autistic brain, results in me being a bad friend, but it's something that I've tried to actively recognize, become aware of, and remedy when I become aware of. But the trick is like, I have to become aware of it. And I don't think it's fair to completely put the onus on the person that I'm harming or that I'm being a bad friend to bring it to my attention when they are actively having to monitor and manage their own emotions in response to me being a bad friend. All of that to say, I think it's a very complicated matter. It's not exactly black and white. People are allowed to not want to put up with my behavior, even if my behavior is a product of me being a neurodivergent. And I think that's the hardest thing for most neurodivergent people to come to terms with. People are allowed to not want to be friends with you because of how you behave, even if your behavior is not your fault. Most people's behavior isn't their fault. For most people, it's still a result of like their genetics, their upbringing, their patterns. Most people are not to blame for their behavior. And so it comes back to like, just because you have a special shiny label for yours doesn't mean that it's more okay and people have to accept it. People still can practice the ability to choose what they want in their lives and what they don't. You're not entitled to any specific person's friendship. You deserve to be loved. You deserve to have friends. You deserve to be accepted, but you do not deserve to be accepted by any individual person just because you want them to accept you. And I do think that's just something you have to eat. You have to learn to want who wants you. But there are also autistic people or autistic coded characters who are more on the villain spectrum than not, like Lewis from Suits, who is positioned as a hard ass who creates problems for people, but it's like his form of seeking validation.
And while I'm personally proud of the fact that you're all unhappy, Harvard is not. So I've invited a representative from the law school to see firsthand how joyful you all are under my tutelage.
So, you want us to lie?
No. I want you to convince this woman that Pearson Hardman makes you rainbows.
And I think whereas I'm very much a Paris apologist, I do more so have mixed feelings for Lewis. I think there are times where the characters on the show are a little too hard on Lewis.
You telling me you never slipped up and had an inappropriate relationship?
Lewis, I don't want to know the answer to that.
I did. It was the most shameful night of my life.
Harvey, don't.
What exactly was so shameful about it?
Well, she was a paralegal, and I took mud with her.
I don't understand. Are you saying you sullied her reputation?
No, I'm saying I sullied the concept of mud.
What the hell are you talking about?
What do I need, a bullhorn? I had a premature modification.
For the known Suits fans, mudding is Louis' special interest. He's saying he shared his special interest too, soon.
But I also think there are times that Lewis just should have found a better way to cope. I think there are times that Lewis found the absolute worst way to deal with the situation. And he has such an extreme lack of social awareness that it's kind of painful to watch sometimes.
Nobody messes with Louis Litt, least of all two Slavs from the firm and shit.
We're not lawyers.
What happened?
We are Susan's parents. She said we could visit. She said the people here were so nice.
Well, of course you're Susan's parents. You look exactly like her.
Lewis is a character that is so incredibly hard to root for. And I can't tell if it's by virtue of the show just forcing him to be a bad guy for having autistic traits, or if he just is an autistic person who is also a bad person. It's really hard to tell sometimes. And I don't want to say this, but I do think it's relevant. And I do think it makes sense with all the other things we've been discussing in this series, on this channel, on this show. I think it also might be that Lewis is a man. And so even within his autistic traits, Lewis still exists within this patriarchal mindset that there are things he is entitled to and there are certain ways he has to go about winning respect and interacting with other men and women. And although I've seen a lot of things on social media where girls are like, autistic boys don't care about social norms and and so they're more likely to be patriarchal, they aren't. So the thing about autistic people, and I think also ADHD people, is that if the rule doesn't make sense, we're not following it. It has to make sense to us. Like, there has to be a logical path behind it. And so sometimes social norms, we just don't care about that because there's no logic behind it. But also autistic people really love rules and patterns. We love pattern seeking. So if the rules make sense, then we can't break them for anything. It becomes almost like a compulsive need. And there are autistic men who really understand the code and the logic of patriarchal thinking. And so they become the greatest arbiters. Is that the right word to use there? And so they become the greatest heroes of the patriarchal movement because it makes sense to them. So like, just be careful with that type of thinking. But in general, you shouldn't seek to put all people in one category because regardless of whether somebody's neurotypical or neurodivergent, people are still individuals. I hate this ideal of trying to hack life by putting everyone in one category or another. Babe, that's the root of bigotry. You mean well, but that is the root of bigotry. And that is how propaganda flourishes. Oh, I can just turn my brain off and just use the set of rules that says if you're yellow, you're bad. If you're green, you're good. It doesn't matter if we're not talking about race. It's still a bad thing. Bigotry is always bad. So you can't all or nothing anything. The whole red flag, green flag. The worst people you know also have green flags. There is no hack. You just have to show up and do the actual labor and take the actual time it takes to get to know a person. Just spend the time getting to know them. And if you don't feel like you have the capacity to get to know them because you can't guarantee the outcome, then stop socializing altogether. There's no guarantees ever. You're not looking for a hack. You're looking for a guarantee that you'll never be hurt again. And that doesn't exist. Love and connection is not about trusting that another person will never hurt you. It's about trusting yourself that you have the resilience to survive and still love yourself if somebody disappoints you. Don't have to worry about what another person does if you're not afraid that that would threaten your ideal of self. We don't want people to hurt us, of course, because it hurts, but we don't want people to hurt us because it will injure our image of ourselves. Somebody hurts me, then I might have to think I'm the bad person because we're too afraid to blame them and to go, that's their choice. That's a reflection of who they are, not a reflection of who I am. And so we just have to practice the resilience and the self-love to know that no matter how somebody treats you, our relationship to ourselves will stay the same. That's it. That's all. It's easy.
I used to wear Stockholm, now I prefer alone. I'd rather do this on my own than be disrespected